Hello, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good day. I'm so excited that the fall's here. I just wish the weather would comply. It's still really hot out there. Today, I'm going to do Not Genetics Experts Part 3, and I'm going to eat a little humble pie. Humble pie always tastes good, right? Uh, so, I'm going to start off with, and I know I've said this before, and I'll probably say this a few more times because I'm wanting to remind people. Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about sexuality and gender? And why am I talking about it the way I'm talking about it? Okay. So number one, God asked me to. Okay. I know that if you're watching this video and you know me, you're gonna know that's true because I wouldn't choose to start talking about this at age 47 when I could have went the rest of my life without talking about this because I just don't have to. I don't owe anyone any explanation for anything. Okay. And that was a very freeing epiphany that a good friend of mine helped me come to. I don't have to I don't have to discuss anything about my life, about my history, anything with anybody ever if I don't want to. Okay? So, here's what I wrote. I'm talking about this because God asked me to. And also, on top of that, people have been talking about this for years concerning me behind my back. Okay? They've been guessing what I am, saying what I am, putting labels on me when I didn't even know what the label was. Okay. So I decided to just go ahead and have a face to face conversation about it. Okay. A face to face conversation that people have been having behind my back for years. And so that way, I'm just ensuring that what is said moving forward will be correct information. Okay. Also, God asked me to use specific examples from my life and history because it makes an impact on the person listening, and I can really see that now, and I really believe that. Okay, and so that's why I'm doing this. Okay, now today I want to eat a little humble pie because I've spoken. I want to be careful because I feel like I've spoken kind of harshly, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that towards the body of Christ, and I don't want to do that towards anyone. So I kind of want to eat a little humble pie just about being a little too passionate about this, and I kind of want to backtrack a little bit because if you're a believer and you're watching this and you're a Christian person, my goal is not to offend you at all. My goal is I would love for you to jump on board and pray for me about this. This has been a really hard task that God has asked me to do here, really hard, but I can also see to a great degree where it's needed. So if you're a Christian person and you watch this, please don't get offended. Try really hard not to. I am gonna try to tone it down a little bit, but I actually want to work with God's people. Okay, so keep that in mind as you watch me moving forward. I had to say a few things to get them out of my system, but now today's video, I wrote at the top, how can I be more solution focused? So today I want to be solution focused. I also want to add that, just real brief, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I feel like I've clarified it enough. But when in all of my videos, when I say if you're not a genetics expert, you don't need to be speaking on this, what I really should have said, because I got to thinking if I even believed that people could be born with transgender symptoms, and while I don't, I'm still struggling with that. Okay, but the way I spoke about it made it. I said concretely that I believe they could, and don't get me wrong, because I believe that things could come down the bloodline that could make a person more prone to have some of these symptoms and stuff like that. But that's what I wish I would have said instead of just making it look like God's creating a bunch of people born with these symptoms, because I don't think that's what's happening. Although I can't say that concretely because I don't have the knowledge. Also, let me say something really quick. Whenever I say on a video you need to speak about it with more intelligence, okay? That's my way of saying if you're ignorant on a subject, and we all have topics that we're ignorant on, okay? And ignorant is just lack of information. So whenever I say that, I want to make it clear I'm not insulting anyone. I'm not the smartest person in the world, never have been, okay? Uh, So I want to make it clear I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence or anything like that. I'm just saying if there are areas of a topic that we really don't know concretely about, I just wanted us to be careful speaking about them. So I wish I would have articulated that a little better. So if you're watching this video and you've watched some of my previous videos and you were kind of like, hey, that's kind of rude, Donna. You've been kind of, you need to quit speaking like that or whatever. I want to humbly apologize and just say, I'm going to do better moving forward because I actually really just want to help people. That's the truth, and that's one of the things. But the number two reason is I just really want to share the gospel. So if you're on my Facebook and you've seen me sharing these videos, just know I'm not sharing them as a ha ha ha. Everybody, look at this. Look what I've done. That's not what I'm doing. Okay. I'm trying to spread the gospel. That is my only goal. That is my number one reason for doing any of this. Okay. Number one reason for doing any of this. But before that is because God asked me to, and I've been called to, I guess, be a wannabe Bible teacher. Okay, if it was up to me, I would have never called myself to do this. Okay, I think asking me to number one, to teach the Bible is a train wreck, but number two, to get on video and teach it to the world is a double, triple, quadruple train wreck. But here we are, so let's get after it. Okay. So just give me a little grace moving forward. I'm not going to speak about things perfectly, and I think I said that from the beginning. So, but I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit and just clarify a little bit about what I did mean. Okay. So, but I'm going to leave those videos up. At some point, I'm going to go through all of my videos and actually edit some of the stuff. Just like I'm not going to tweak them too much, but just take some things out that I wasn't in love with that I said, or maybe the way I said it. But the videos that I've put out so far, I'm just going to leave them like they are. Because here's the conclusion I came to. I could do this completely perfectly, like completely perfectly, and someone would still find something wrong with it. And that's actually been very freeing because I'm never going to be perfect. I even tell people to come to my office that if you're looking for perfection, you better go somewhere else because you're not going to find it in me. Okay? So, y'all give me grace if you can. And if you think that for some reason I don't want to work with you or I don't want to talk with you about these things or because of the way I've spoken, it feels just too intense or harsh, don't take it like that, okay? Let's don't take it like that. Because that's number one. Number two, something I wanted to say here today is there needs to be a distinction. Here I'm going to read what I wrote. There needs to be a distinction made between the influx of transgenders symptoms with people that we currently see and the ones who have been dealing with these symptoms for years. And the reason why I say that is because the ones that have transgender symptoms nowadays are way, way different than people who had transgender symptoms when I was growing up. And I'm not saying that we're better than them, but we are a lot more conservative than them. And I don't know, but it's a different population. And so I would just like for people to not put everybody who had these issues into one category moving forward, because it's just not helpful. And plus the some of the stuff that you see on TV with all of the clips of them talking to the current people, have the current generation having these issues, it just paints such a horrible picture. And don't get me wrong, they're doing a lot to help create that picture for themselves. I'm not in denial about that for sure. It makes it really hard not to be very, very judgmental on them. So I get that, but I just want you to understand that everybody who has had some of these identity issues is not like that population. And I think I would really like it if people would be careful putting everybody who has had a history of these things into one category, because it's just not a fair representation. So the next thing I want to cover, this should be, I think this video will probably only be 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30 at the most. But I want to talk about, this is something that I've kind of been avoiding it, but also I wanted to validate experiences before I went here. Okay. So that's another reason why I've spoken so passionately about these things, is because I wanted to validate experiences. And I understand some people are like, we don't have to validate experiences. We just read the Bible like it says. Hey, that's how you want to do the gospel. That's great. But I want to do it differently. Okay. And we don't, and And we don't have to be against each other because we're both for the gospel. Okay. So I wanted to do it the way I did it. And I also feel like that God wanted me to do it the way that I've done it. And that makes me stand even more firm in doing it like this. But I would be a very poor wannabe Bible teacher, or even Christian for that matter, if I chose not to address the demonic part of this. So today I want to talk about, I call it more wiles of the devil. More wiles of the devil. Okay. So I'm going to bring up some people. I'm going to briefly name some people here. We've got Jonathan Cahn, who talks about the mystery of the return of the gods. We've got if you go watch the Confessionals, it's a YouTube channel. They talk a lot about these things. Okay. And then Off the Deep End with Taylor Welsh. He covers this in passing. I feel like Jonathan Cahn has the most extensive things that I've seen on it, but I need to watch more of it. So I'm just going to kind of go over a little bit about what Jonathan Cahn says, because this specific topic, when we're dealing with demonic entities, I say it's outside my range. To be fair, I think it's outside of a lot of people's range, but Jonathan seems to have more understanding about it than some of the others that I've seen. And so I'm just going to read a little bit about what Jonathan said, and then I'm going to cover some more things, and then I'm going to read in this book that another person wrote, and then I'll get ready to close. Okay? So Jonathan Cahn says that what is happening in America right now, he calls it the return of the gods. Okay? And he says that the Bible says that behind the gods of the ancient world were actually entities. Okay, so what he's saying is, because people have been asking me recently, why are we seeing such an influx of the gender symptoms, the gender dysphoria, and things like that? Why are we seeing such an influx of that? And I think it's a fair question. It is a really fair question. So today I want to address one reason why I believe we are. Okay, because I believe that Jonathan Cahn is really onto something here. He says one of the reasons we're seeing an influx of this is because some of these ancient gods in the end times will return to America. Okay, so if you're watching this and you don't believe in the devil, well, it's not going to get better from here. Okay, I've made it abundantly clear from the beginning that I know that the devil exists. Okay, I know it concretely, not just because the word says it. I know it for a lot of other reasons. Okay, so basically, Jonathan Cahn says the ancient world were actually entities. What caused them to leave, and where did they go, and what would happen if they came back? He calls it a mystery of the return of the gods. He says that what happened was that Jesus came into the world. So he's saying during the Middle Eastern, ancient Eastern cultures, that they were worshiping the gods like, I'm going to butcher their names, so I'm going to say a few of them. Dionysus, Bel, and I think there was one. I know his short name is Pan, but I can't remember the other. And then there's Zeus, and then I think there's Moloch. There's a whole list of them, you guys. And so he says that the ancient cultures thought they were actually worshiping these gods, but there was an entity behind it. Okay, and I'm going to resist the temptation to talk about witchcraft right now, because that's definitely happening in modern day. It happened then with witchcraft too, but it's definitely happening now. Like, people think they can they can practice witchcraft and things like that without a spirit being behind it. And the Bible makes clear that no, that's actually not possible, because there is a devil who runs an organized kingdom on this earth. So anyways, so Jonathan Cahn says these ancient entities used to be in our culture back in the day, and then Jesus came into the world, and there was a clash of the gods with Jesus, who is also God. He says this is one reason why the early church was persecuted. He says eventually the temples and the festivals to these gods were abandoned after Jesus came. He says there are ancient records that discuss the inability to receive from those gods once Jesus shows up on the scene. I thought that was very interesting, because I did not know that before. Okay, and just remember, John, if you don't like Jonathan Cahn or whatever, and look, I want to say something really quick. You don't have to like a lot of ministers. You don't have to like everything about a lot of ministers, preachers, deliverance ministers. You don't have to like a lot of everything that they do, but that doesn't mean that what they're doing is not important. So I really, this is another thing where, the body of Christ is talking about the culture needs to learn how to disagree. Well, I think the body of Christ needs to learn how to disagree. We need to learn how to, like, maybe you don't love what I'm saying. Maybe I've said some things that are like, ooh, Donna, I don't like this, whatever. That doesn't mean that I'm not doing a good work here. That doesn't mean that I'm not spreading the gospel and doing what God has called me to do. And I think we need to get back. We need, as the church, we need to go for, we've got further to go with this. Okay. It's a big problem in the church, and we've got to quit just writing people off because they think or do things a different way than we would in the church. We need to lead by example in the church. Anyways, so my point is, there are people who would probably say bad things about Jonathan Cahn, and I don't know everything about him, but I feel like he's onto something here. So he says, behind these gods were spirits. Gods can end, but spirits do not die. Okay? Spirits do not die. And then I put in parentheses, even though I did it anyways, resist the temptation to go on a rant about witchcraft. Anyways, Khan calls it the greatest exorcism in the human history back in the ancient Middle Eastern culture, when Jesus came and all these gods were shut down. Okay? He says, once the gods were done away with, the spirits left, but where did they go? And what if they are responsible for what is happening today? Okay. And again, that's where I've told you guys this is a little bit outside my range. I haven't done a whole lot of study on this. Okay. I really haven't. But I think that these biblical scholars and some of these YouTubers that are discussing these things, who have also been called by God to discuss these things, I really think they're onto something. So I will link some videos in the description for you to watch in case you're interested. But Jonathan Cahn's not the only one talking about this. There are several people talking about this. So there's another book by a pastor named Cade Young, and his book is he discusses this in the book Ancient Roots of the LGBTQ Community. And so I'm just going to read just a little bit from him. But if you want to pick up this book, it's a pretty good book and covers some of these things. So Cade says, it's easy to get distracted by drag queen story hour in our schools and the pride displays at the store. These are legitimate issues, but symptoms of the main issue. And then he says the goddess Ishtar, Ishtar, in case I'm saying that incorrectly. About 2,400 years ago, we have records of a goddess named Ishtar. Most people know her as the goddess of love, fertility, and sex, but she is also the goddess of war. How could one goddess be known for both love and war? That's our first indicator that this is really a spirit that causes confusion, one that occupies both ends of the spectrum. And on ancient tablets, the goddess described herself as follows: when I sit in the ale house, I am a woman, and I am an exuberant young man. In other words, Ishtar was a woman and simultaneously a man. She could go back and forth and express the characteristics of either gender. You'll also find an ancient Sumerian hymn that says, turn a man into a woman and a woman into a man, to change one into the other. This goddess had male priests who presented themselves as women. They wore women's clothing, put on makeup, and paraded themselves around. Sound familiar? There was 1 month out of the year where this goddess especially possessed culture. You want to guess what it is? June. And she was even known as the goddess of pride. This same problem has resurfaced time and time again, each time under a new name and disguise. What once was referred to as Ishtar is now referred to as LGBTQ. And for some of you guys watching this who might get a little bit offended by that, maybe you're in the lifestyle, whatever, just know that Cade has a history of being in the lifestyle too. So it's a really good book, and he talks about he's kind of going to cover what I'm going to cover, and he covers a little bit more about what I'm going to cover in a minute. Is, if we've opened up some kind of ancient principality, some people call them deities. Maybe there's a difference between a deity and a principality. I have no idea. I call most of them principalities, but if we've opened up some kind of ancient principality, well, Well, what do we do with that? What is the answer? Okay. And so that's, like I said, today I was going to be uh, solution focused. Okay. So that's just two people. We have other channels. I didn't even quote very much from Off the Deep End with Taylor Welsh or the Confessionals, but they cover other areas where these ancient gods seem to be returning. Okay, and there's we have physical evidence. There's story after story of people encountering things that they can't really explain that are otherworldly. So I recommend, again, I've said this 100 times. Okay, if you don't want to believe this biblical narrative, I highly, highly challenge you to go to the dark side and see what you find. Because I can almost guarantee you, you're going to sprint towards the Bible. You're going to sprint towards the Bible. Okay. But even if you don't, okay, go research the dark side, because you're going to find something there. I can guarantee it. Okay. There's not a doubt in my mind. If for some reason you don't come back, and I want to say I would eat some humble pie, but I know that you're going to find something. So I'm not even going to say that, because I know there's stuff over there. Okay. So number three, I say that these deities or principalities, they could very well be, and more than likely are, the reason for the overwhelming number of cases being seen today of transgender. So there, it's like I think Jonathan Cahn refers to it as a possession of America. He says America is possessed with these things. Okay, and I think Cade follows that up with, we've got to become unpossessed. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So, so these deities could very well be, and are more than likely, is the reason for the overwhelming number of cases being seen today. So my next question, these are all going to be rhetorical, because I've told you guys I don't have the answer exactly. I have some of the answer. Okay, so how do we fix this? Okay, how can I know my parents are asking this, because the parents want to know, when can we start sending our kids back to school and not worry they're going to come home confused about their gender. I mean, people are exiting public school like clockwork, you guys, and I get it. I mean, I would have a hard time if I had a 4 or 5 year old. I would have a hard time sending them to school thinking they're going to come home, and I've got to figure out a way to help them try to stick to their gender. Okay. um, so I said, how do we fix this? Can this be fixed? Or is this just a part of the last days? I said, I do not like the answer of this just being part of the last days. And do we have to continue putting up with this bullying from this ancient principality? I don't really think we do. Okay. And then I say, I really believed that this generation would not only witness the return of Christ, but that they would also bring down the gates of hell. I thought that this generation would bring down the gates of hell. But am I just engaging wishful thinking with a question mark? Honestly, I'm not sure. But I do know that the Bible says whatever we bind on earth will be bound in heaven. My interpretation of this is that if we reject this, heaven backs us. Okay? If we reject that the new norm is kids being and teenagers being completely confused about their gender in overwhelming numbers, even to the point that churches are calling out for gender experts to come into the church. Okay? I want to say that we can reject this and that heaven backs us. I really, really do. And even more for the kids. Okay? Even more for the people dealing with some of these symptoms. So there's that. So again, I repeat, how do we reject this on earth and get heaven to back us? And wouldn't the victims of this principality need to come out of agreement with it first? So we as the church, we can keep rejecting it, but if people keep believing the lies or not denying the things that come down the bloodline or things like that, and wanting to really cling to biblical truth, will that actually fix the problem? And I believe that the answer to that is no, but I'm not positive, because again, as I said, this is outside my range of expertise and really jumps more into the, I think it's outside of everybody's range of expertise, and we've got to get the Holy Spirit to lead us, and we've got to work together. We've got to work together, and that's another reason I ate the humble pie today. Okay, it's not the first time I've ever eaten humble pie, and it's certainly not going to be the last. Okay, I ate humble pie today on purpose because people are really suffering with this. And if anything, one of the reasons that I spoke about it so passionately and also wanted to apologize for being maybe going too far, speaking about it a little too harshly, is many parents and children are traumatized with what this has done. Okay. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Especially, and I've said this before and I'm going to keep saying it, especially God's people. I know there's people who think that you can't have these issues and be in the church, and you already know how I feel about that. You can have these issues and be a Christian. Now, what you're going to do with them might reflect on your Christianity moving forward. I'm not really sure. That's outside of my range, and I'm not going to speak for everybody. I'm going to let God speak to some of the people going through these things and what they need to do, okay? But there's many people in the church dealing with these issues. I'm here to confirm I know this concretely, okay? In my personal life and outside my personal life, okay? Many people in the church having these issues. So I would like for us to have, I don't know. Anyways, let me stay on topic. So how do we reject this on earth and get heaven to back us? And wouldn't the victims of this principality need to come out of agreement with it first? How could believers have a head-on collision with the culture where it currently is while maintaining biblical integrity, loving like Jesus loved, and taking its dominion, the believer taking dominion on planet Earth? And no, I don't mean dominion in some crazy take over everything kind of a way. I just mean not allowing, because God has said I'm going to read about dominion and the loss of dominion here in a minute in another book. But we're which I know Adam lost dominion, but we also have forms of being able to pick dominion back up and not allow certain things. And so I'm not really sure, but I know that we can't get there if we don't know how to work together. And at the same time, we need to start looking at people as victims. If this is true, and I suspect it is, that this principality is at work to a great degree, we need to get better at looking at some of these people as victims of this, you guys, especially the young children and adolescents. Okay, but there are many adults who have been victims of this too. Many adults. Okay, so the next question I say is, here, you know what? Let me just read it again for effect. How could believers have a head-on collision with the culture where it currently is while maintaining biblical integrity, loving kids like Jesus loved, or loving like Jesus loved, and taking its dominion? Is this even in the realm of possibilities with where we are? I'm praying about this. I do not have all the answers, as I've said from the beginning. The only answer I know concretely is that if we stop having healthy dialogue and do nothing, this principality gains more ground. This principality gains more ground. Okay? I also know that victim blaming is not effective either. I welcome any believer watching this to pray with me about this significant issue. Okay? In closing, I want to read from a book written by Timothy Alberino. It's called Birthright, and he's talking to these things all tie together. So he's talking about these things too. He's talking about, well, I'll tell you the title of the book, and that'll tell you something. It's called Birthright: The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on Planet Earth. Okay, so this is that cloud. If you're watching this and you're not a believer, this is that cloud of witnesses I'm talking about. There's a whole cloud of witnesses out there doing research and talking about these things, about things written in this biblical narrative that are coming to pass. Humble yourself. Take these things into consideration. I implore you, humble yourself. Take these things into consideration, okay? But anyways, Timothy Alberino talks about this. He's saying that basic, and the book of Revelation makes this clear too, that at some point man does lose his dominion on planet Earth. But I've never seen it put into words like Timothy Alberino. If you really want to get your mind blown, I highly recommend you buy his book, okay? Uh, so I said, this too bears witness to the return of the gods and the end of the age that is upon us. Okay? So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs out of this. I'll show you the book right here. Timothy Alberino, Birthright. Leave that up there for a little while, or maybe you can pause it. Timothy continues to blow my mind. Okay, I told you guys from the beginning I was a biblical nerd, and I think he's far beyond that. But he is so intelligent that I have to read stuff he says 3 or 4 times just trying to take it in. So here we go. I'm just going to read little stuff to kind of pull from this and close this topic out. So here's what Timothy says. The kings of the earth are the hybrid beast kings, and the rulers are their fathers, the dragon princes. They and the post-human denizens of Apollo's empire are conspiring to make war with the powers of heaven. As in the first rebellion, the dragon will muster a formidable army. Many morning stars will defect and join his ranks. The old alliances will be renewed. The ancient ruins will be rebuilt, and the dragon's confederacy will be revived in all its strength. Though I cannot supply scriptural text to buttress the postulation, I suspect that the kings of the earth and their fathers, the rulers, will plan a 2-pronged attack designed to defend the empire of Apollo and resist the return of Christ. The dragon prince will deploy their extraterrestrial forces from fortifications on Mars and elsewhere in the solar system. On Earth, the beast kings and their post-human legions will field the armaments of the elder race. Flying discs will patrol the outer atmospheres of the planet, while mile-wide motherships prepare to repel the armies of the kingdom should they break through the dragon's first line of defense. Emboldened by their overwhelming force of arms, the nations will rage with inhuman madness and comfort themselves in the delusion that the dragon princes and their half-breed sons are mightier than the powers of heaven, but the Lord will look on with a smile. This really is talking. I told you guys I was going to talk about the War of Armageddon at some point. This is talking about the War of Armageddon. So that's what this is all leading to. Okay, so if you doubt that ancient principalities, deities, whatever you want to call them, are back here and operating on this earth, I heavily challenge you to pray about it. Heavily. Okay? So it says, before Christ returns to dash the nations to pieces like a potter's vessel, the earth will resemble a dystopian nightmare. There will be no atheists in the new golden age. As predicted, all will worship the dragon and the son Apollo. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be blasphemed as a tyrant and impostor. Jesus will be hated, his name outlawed, and those who follow him hunted like wild animals. Apollo will rule the planet with no one to oppose him. In Revelation chapter 5, John is caught up in the throne room of heaven to witness a scene of tremendous implication. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Timothy says, have you ever wondered why John weeps over this scroll? Why does it elicit such profound sorrow? John's reaction always seemed so irrational to me until I realized that this scroll is the title deed of planet Earth. Woo! That gives me chills. The title deed of planet Earth. John is weeping because mankind has lost dominion of the realm he was created to rule, and no one is able to reclaim it for him. But that is not how the scene ends. Jesus is able to take the scroll and open its seals because he is the son of Adam, the root and offspring of David, a legal inheritor of the human birthright, and a rightful claimant to the throne of his ancestors. He has all authority in heaven as Son of God and all authority on earth as Son of Man. It's go, you can't even read this without seeing how genius God is. Upon taking the deed from the hand of his father, the Lamb begins to break its seven seals one by one. With the breaking of each seal, a new catastrophe is unleashed on the nations. Wars, famines, plagues, and cataclysms rock the earth. The wardens of the kingdom watch the obliteration of the bestial empire with bated breath as the Son waits for the Father's command. Finally, when the nations lie in smoldering ruin, a trumpet blast will peal through the air, and the seed of the woman, the dragon slayer, will rise from his throne, march forth with the armies of heaven to reclaim the earth for the sons of Adam. Apollo will gather what forces remain in the valley of Armageddon to make his stand against the prince of princes and the king of kings and lord of lords. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True and Righteous. He judges and makes war. His eyes are like flames of fire, and on his head are many diadems. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Okay? One more little paragraph. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called all the birds that fly directly overhead, Come, gather for the great supper of God to eat flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet, who in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, and the rest were slain by the sword that came from the mouth of him who was sitting on the horse. And all the birds were gorged with their flesh. So, I just think all these things bear witness to one another, and I think it's important that we make informed decisions. So to the unbeliever who may be watching this, there's too much information out here that back up the things that are going to come to fold, that are coming to pass in this biblical narrative. There are too many things in here to have an excuse to not believe this anymore. Okay, so if you're not believing this anymore, especially as it comes to pass before your very eyes, you're in denial, and you need to pray about that for real. Okay, you need to get with some people that can help you come out of denial. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back here shortly with Lord Part 3. Okay, have a blessed day. Thank you, guys.